finally we can get out those cowboy hats and cowboy boots because we are headed to the Lone Star State. Hey everyone, welcome back to the second episode of Pre-Race Pulse right here on Racing America. In this show, we're gonna give you all of the headlines and big talking points from the world of NASCAR, plus preview the race weekend ahead. Of course, I'm your host, Taylor Kitchen. It's so good to see you all again. And let's start off by diving into some NASCAR news. In case you missed it, Ronnie Childers, Inspire Motorsports mutually agreed to part ways effective immediately last week. It came as a shock to me. I don't know if it came as a shock to you, but it definitely came as a shock to Justin Haley, as he had no clue this was happening until after his Tuesday meetings where he was going through, how do we make the car good for this coming weekend? And he was notified shortly after that. Ronnie Childers on Sirius XM NASCAR Radio shared his thoughts saying, hey, there was a point where I think they could just tell I wasn't happy. Things got a little quiet, and mutually at that point you can feel something's up, and ultimately it was decided that they would part ways. Now from Inspire Motorsports standpoint, they said in a team statement that they took the off week to really figure out what was going on, what the path was forward for them, and ultimately after reassessing what they wanted their program to be going forward, they decided that Ronnie was not part of that program going forward in the interest of competition. So what does this mean for Ronnie Childers and his future in NASCAR? Well, right now there seems to be no offers on the table for him, but he reiterated he wants to be a crew chief in NASCAR. The issue is, where would that be? He said that he wants to get to 700 starts in the Cup Series. He wants to hit that landmark of 50 career wins as a crew chief. It's just a matter of where will he land. In the meantime, though, on that 7 car, Ryan Sparks is going to be filling in as an interim crew chief to Justin Haley, which, by the way, Ryan was the crew chief on the 7 for many years prior to Justin joining the team, I guess, late last year. But Ryan Sparks is very familiar with the 7 and the 7 team, so hopefully there is a good path forward there as they search for a long-term fill-in for a crew chief on that 7 car. But very interesting news that caught me by surprise last week. The last piece of news I want to talk about technically isn't news, it's a paint scheme review, but come on, by the diecast behind me, we have to talk about cool paint schemes and diecasts at some point on this show. So this one for Chase Elliott is phenomenal. It is the Napa 100-year anniversary paint scheme, and just the gold with the blue looks so good. And you might have seen this paint scheme on other Napa drivers' cars this season. For instance, Ron Capps and NHRA had this paint scheme on his funny car this past week at the 4-1 Nationals in Charlotte. Casey Kane is going to run this on his sprint car. It just looks so good, and I am so excited to see this scheme on the track this weekend. With that said, let's go into our hot topics for the Texas race weekend. Starting off with Austin Cindric and the 2 team. Obviously, winning at Talladega, it is a big deal for that team, and I think they can continue that momentum forward because Texas is a decent track for Cindric. If you remember last year, he had great qualifying speed, good speed going into the race, and ultimately things didn't shake out between strategy and cautions. But I do think you need to keep your eye on that number 2 Ford of Austin Cindric. You can catch our full interview with him following the race at Talladega on Racing America, by the way.
I feel like we're leaps and bounds ahead of where we were at this race last year. You mentioned, good speed. I felt like we qualified well here and had some good speed, but ultimately not enough to kind of get back through the field. So I think that we've really improved a lot of our package since then.
Let's talk about Bubba Wallace because he is very good at Texas Motor Speedway. Quite honestly, in 2023, the win for him came down to just a wrong lane choice for him on one of the final restarts. It cost him. I think he can go into this weekend potentially looking for a win or maybe a top 5. We'll talk about that a little later for sure. But Bubba Wallace, his pit crew is one of the best in the Cup Series right now, ranked towards the top of that list. He's had pretty decent consistency this season. I know sometimes the results don't show it, but ultimately that 23 team is strong, and if you're looking at any track for this team to get a win, I definitely think it is at Texas Motor Speedway. So that 23 team has a lot of positive momentum, but unfortunately, there are some teams that don't have really any good momentum right now because of disqualifications at Talladega. We're talking about the 22 of Joey Logano and the 60 of Ryan Preece. Joey Logano threw away what would have been a 41-point day. Ryan Preece threw away what would have been a 40-point day for that team. Now, on a positive for Joey, he's pretty good at Texas, has a win from back in, I think, 2014? So he's going to need a good result to get some of the points back that he lost at Texas. Ultimately, a fine track for him. He has an average finishing position of 11.3, so I'm not too concerned for that 22 team. The issue is with the 60 team. Now, for Ryan Preece, this hasn't been a great track for him. He had his best result last year at Stewart-Haas Racing. This year, he is with another Ford team with RFK. I am curious to see how he does. The final storyline I'm looking for is Jesse Love. He made his Cup Series debut at Bristol this season. Now he's making his second Cup Series start at Texas, but with Beard Motorsports. Now, when I think of Beard Motorsports, and maybe when you think of Beard Motorsports, you're thinking of super speedway racing. We've seen they've done incredible on those tracks. But this weekend, they're headed to 1.5 miles, a track that they typically don't compete at. So I'm curious to see how that equipment fares. More so, I'm curious to see what Jesse Love can make of it. His goal for Bristol was to learn, finish the race, and get comfortable in the car, and he did all of those things. Carry that forward to Texas, and maybe we will see a better result for him. But again, curious to see what he can do in that 62 equipment. We know the 62 can lead races at super speedways, but can it have the same, type of energy or the same success, I should say, at intermediate tracks? I don't know. I would hope at least that Jesse Love can find himself inside the top 20 to finish this race, but we will see on Sunday. I know I just talked about the Cup Series quite a bit, but it is a triple header weekend for Truck, Xfinity, and Cup. Now, for the truck race, that'll be at 8 p.m. on Friday on FS1. For the Xfinity Series, their race will be on the CW starting at 2 p.m. on Saturday. And of course, for Sunday, that race at Texas for the Cup Series is at 3:30 p.m. Eastern Time on FS1 as well. Now, this track is pretty tame, I should say. Of course, it is a 1.5 mile course. What makes it tricky is turns 1 and 2 and turns 3 and 4 have different degrees of banking. In turns 1 and 2, it's 20 degrees of banking. In turns 3 and 4, it's 25 degrees of banking. So you're going to have to approach things differently on either end of the track. So that'll be the trick for these drivers. And of course, being able to pass. That's been a consistent issue with the Gen 7 car, but that's going to be very prevalent at this 1.5 miles. But time to get into our predictions for top fives. Now, I feel like it's a given that Corey Heim should finish in the top 5 in any of these races, but for Corey Heim, he finished second last year to Kyle Busch. I think he was out for redemption of trying to win that race last year. I think he's going to finish inside the top 5 for the Truck Series. I've got Majeski, Sanchez, Caden Honeycutt. Now, Nice has a pretty solid 1.5 mile package, and I see him continuing his success this year, moving in the right direction. Last person I have inside the top 5 here is Raja Caruth. He's pretty good at this track, and I hope to see him inside the top 5 for the Texas race. Next up, my Xfinity Series top 5 picks. And if you watched last week's video, some names are going to be pretty familiar to you. I swear I looked at the stats, but the names kind of came out the same. Of course, you got to put Sam Mayer into your top 5. Won this race last year. He is very good at Texas. The issue is, or the concern I have is, can that success continue at Haas Factory Team? And I guess we're going to find out. He is sitting really high in the point standings right now for Xfinity, so maybe a good weekend for him. Now, the guy that finished second to him last season was Ryan Sieg. I'm putting Ryan Sieg in my top 5 for this race. I think that team is out for redemption from last year. Harrison Burton is coming off of back-to-back top 10s on the schedule. Maybe he'll make it 3 this weekend. Let's throw Austin Hill into my top 5 predictions too. He has the best average finishing position at this track of the full-time active Xfinity Series drivers. I think he could make it another top 5 or top 10 this weekend. And last but not least, it's an obvious pick, you guys, but Justin Allgaier is so good at this track. I see him potentially making it into the top 5. Last but not least, we got our projected top 5 for the Cup Series. You got to put William Byron in there. I mean, he has the best average finishing position of all of the active Cup Series drivers at this track. Finished in 3rd last year, has 1 win. I gotta say, William Byron will likely be inside the top 5 when this race is done. I also think, speaking of beat last names, Chase Briscoe, he's performed well here in Ford equipment. My question is, can he do the same in Toyota equipment? And I'm just going to throw him in there for our top 5. I think you look at Bubba Wallace is a given for a top 5 finish. You look at, I'm going to say Austin Cindric. We talked about him earlier in the show and what momentum can do for that team. Last but not least, I'm probably going to throw Carson Hocevar in here. He finished inside the top 10 last year. The team has had great speed, great success. It's just a matter of being mistake-free. So I think we could see that 77 car inside the top 5. But what are your predictions for this weekend? Leave them in the comments below. And thank you all so much for tuning into this episode of Pre-Race Pulse right here on Racing America every Thursday at 6 p.m. Of course, my name's Taylor Kitchen, and make sure you are getting all of your NASCAR news from us here at Racing America. Thank you all so much for tuning in. Have a great race weekend, and we'll see you later. Bye.